Namato Ratana Tayasa. May I pay homage to Triple Gem, the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha. My respect goes to my parents and my teachers. Hello, good evening, everyone. So today is Thursday, the 19th of November 2020. And this is Achan Sujan from Varapunya Meditation Center, Aberdeen, Scotland. As usual, I'm here with you all tonight. The cold, very cold night. So today, early morning, after the chanting and meditation, about 8 o'clock, we saw first snow of the year in the winter coming. And it was beautiful, a beautiful snow, an early snow. It was difficult, very cold, and it was 2 degrees here in the center, and obviously here in the center more colder than in the city. So it was lovely to see the nature change, and we had a little snap pictures. And then an all day become a very cold day, and yet we have a lot of work going on. So early morning went down to order some materials for the barn flooring, and then setting up for the electricity, and also teaching like that. So days passed. We human beings are a psychological being, and we believe in something that we have come across or that we have experienced on the basis of perception. And if something happens, if something is saying something, then we try to make sense of it by comparing to something else. Suppose someone tells you your name, or someone tells you someone's name. In order to remember that name belonged to that particular person, psychologically, our mind works so fast and comparing to that person to someone else that we are familiar with. Yes, Yvonne, it's still freezing cold. Yeah, มาเลยนะช่วงนี้หนาวมาก Yeah, so in order to remember that person and that person's name, we normally compare with something, someone who we are familiar with or already known to us. And so we perceive a new person through our old perception. Without that old perception, we would not be able to recognize new things. That's why we are all beings of our own old perceptions. But new perception, new things that comes to contact with us, always gives further more perceptions about a little bit of a widening from the existing one. But if we haven't seen or we haven't experienced such things or such stories, then we would not be able to comprehend that. I remember a few years ago when I was I went to join the ceremony in Wat Pasing, UK, Runcorn, and Chester. And then one of the members of the community took us to visit one of the churches in Chester. And in that church, cathedral, was a very special carved an elephant. And I was told the stories that when that church was built, travelers informed the carpenter that they have seen an elephant in Asia, and they wanted to have an elephant one of the chairs. So the carpenter was instructed to carve an elephant. But this carpenter never seen that elephant and couldn't imagine of that elephant. So he asked traveler to explain. And this traveler explained that it is like a horse. Belly is a little bit long and it has got a trunk, like a hose pipe. So carpenter simply carved horse with a little bit of big belly and a trunk. And now if someone tells you that carved elephant is an elephant, and those you have seen would find it quite a joke. But at that time, when a carpenter was carving that, an elephant is the perfect for him. Similar story comes that in the time of the Buddha, actually, Buddha gave this simile, that there are blind people, and then they were asked to define the elephant. So some went to touch a leg, someone to touch the ears, and someone touched the belly, someone touched the trunk, and they were asked to explain. A person who touched the legs said it's like a pillar. Someone who touched the ear, saying, "Oh, it is like a fan." A person who touches the trunk is saying that, "Oh, it is like a hose pipe." And a person who touches the belly saying that, "Oh, this is like a wall." So this is we are seeing through our own perceptions rather than the reality itself. So that's why it's very difficult to perceive the reality or understand the reality, because we are always living in our past memories, past perceptions, and thinking that those are the correct perceptions. You may have come across with some people and you have a good expression and a good impression about them. And later on, whenever they have behaved differently, the impression still will be in you, a good impression. So that's why we all perceive things through our own perceptions, and that already exist. And that perceptions are, again, we have experienced. We were taught, we were grown up with that. And that's why we cannot see the reality. And that's why always there is a gap between ourselves, our perception, our understanding, and then the reality itself. So there is a lack of words to explain the reality as such as the truth. It is not easy, or one cannot. And this is what we are experiencing in the world. So when there was once in a connected discourses, Buddha asked people, the monks, saying that, do you know the perception? The perception is things that we perceive. And how do we perceive things? And Buddha further on saying that we perceive things through the form and the colors, like a blue, green, circle or shape and different shapes. And that's how we perceive things. But the reality is different. We conceptualize it by our own perception, that what we have been and what we have understood. And this is what we need to understand. Suppose if I say to you that I went to a cafe shop to drink a coffee, you would be imagining that coffee shop or a cafe that you visit regularly. You don't think of that one, but you will think of another one which you intend to go but you haven't been to, or may have been one or two ways. And then when I talk about the coffee, you would be thinking about the coffee. Maybe that's a latte, or maybe that is cappuccino. And this again, if you are drinking cappuccino, then you will be thinking about the latte. And if you are drinking, your favorite one is latte, then you will be thinking about the cappuccino. This is how we perceive things. But the reality is that I may have taken a mocha, and I may have gone to the different cafe than you have thought of. Similarly, when I'm saying about something, at that time again, your perception will be trying to make sense of it by your own perception. So our perception is not true. That is why people can influence us a lot, because we perceive through our own personal experiences, and that makes sense to us. When someone is talking to you, when someone is speaking on some subjects, when we are listening, because we have been through, because we can see through, because we have understood in such ways, and if someone new person is explaining, adding with a few extra information, may not be right, may not be true, but the amount of information that a person has given to you is correct, because you have understood, then the rest of the information you will perceive it as true too. So this is the danger. Yeah, this is the danger in what we perceive. So Buddha's teachings, that's why it is about seeing that perception, or seeing that thing as the reality. The gap between the words or the explanation and then the reality, this gap, rather than keeping this gap is as its gap by the color, the shape, or our perceptions, we take that gap, or we simply sit on the middle of the gap. And taking the shape and the colors are simply a vehicle, a tool to understand the reality. It's like if you are coming to the center and you never driven to the center or never came to the center, then you have to follow the signposts. And when you look at that signposts are simply posting or directing you towards the center. The signpost itself is not the reality. The reality is the signpost. By relying on that signpost, we walk through. We walk along the direction, that signposting, and then finally we will be arriving at the destination. So similarly, all the perception that we perceive, doesn't matter what we hear, doesn't matter what we see, doesn't matter what we come to contact, doesn't matter what information you received. Take it as an information, as a signpost rather than the reality. And in order to see the reality, what we have to do is to investigate. So called manasikara. Investigate. That's why when we look at the Buddha's teachings in the Kalama Sutta, Buddha said, do not believe. Do not merely believe that this is written in the scripture, this is said by my teacher, this is said, and this has been a culture, this is my teacher said, and so and so. There are 10 different questions to take or principles to think about, that anything that we hear, do not perceive it as a reality at once. We have to investigate. And so by that investigation, then we will be understanding the reality pertaining to itself, rather than the reality that we perceive through our memories, through our experiences, but the reality as it is. And the reality as it is that our perception defines that things that we come to contact, whether that's a color and a shape, is the reality. Whereas the true reality is perception itself is a changing. It's called anicca, anicca sanya. Perception of these things are changing. A perception of change. And we know that everything changes, but always we look at the outside thing, inanimate and animate things outside. But practice of a meditation, according to Buddha's teachings, is to look inside and understand that things within ourselves is changing. We may perceive ourselves as me. There is no change. So we pertain our names as, let's say, me, as a Sujan. And 20, 30 years ago, I was again Sujan, and I take it as myself. I am. For 20, 30, 40 years, I am. But 30, 40 years ago, this Sujan wasn't this big, wasn't this fat, and was not able to speak English. So and so. And despite of this such a change, the perception is such that this is me and it was me too. There is no change. And the first thing here, what we have to understand, that the Sujan here, and 43 years old, with a fat and a belly and then a chubby, was not the same person 30, 40 years ago. It has changed. Physically changed. Mentally changed. Perception to the world has changed. Perception to my own physical body has changed. In the past, people, when they are 20s, always thinking about their handsomeness and beauty, always think about how can I be more beautiful, how can I be more handsome. And gradually later on we realize that, we are getting old. Body is complaining about our well-being. Yesterday, I was talking to one of our close members of the center. And she also said that now I'm getting old. Now she has accepted that getting old. No more young anymore. Not young animals. Apologies, I'm just coughing, I don't know why. So, our perception changes. The way we think changes. And gradually as we grow up, perception to ourselves, perception to the world, perception to the people, environment, all changes too. And this is the first thing we have to understand, that our perception is changeable and it is changing. Although we perceive things through our perception, through our memories, yet we need to be very careful, very awareness, and always have a wise attention to things that we perceive, things that we come across. According to Buddha's advice is to do not believe as soon as you hear, do not take it as the truth as soon as you come across. Investigate, put it into practice, and then if that is beneficial, then go for it. Continue, practice for it. And then with that, gradually, there will be a new form of a knowledge. The knowledge is the true knowledge. There is no gap between the conventional truth and ultimate truth. You have understood that these conventional truths are simply a signposting to attain the ultimate truth, to understand the ultimate truth. It's like a signpost. So, we are all psychological beings, and we are always affected by what we hear, what we see, what we contact. We come to contact with that. And before letting these invade, letting these take control, convincing it, use wise attention, use wisdom, and investigate. And with that investigation, we will have a new perception, the perception free from the old perception that invades. And that is the anicca sanya, the perception of anicca, the impermanence, that everything that we perceive are also nature to impermanence. So, with this, I end here for tonight's reflection talk, and in a few moments' time we're going to have a chanting and guided meditation, and you're most welcome to join with us. Meanwhile, as usual, if you have any questions regarding the Buddha's teachings and the meditation, you're most welcome to ask, and I will reply privately and as well as publicly if possible. So, see you shortly, and join with me for the chanting and guided meditation. With this, may all be well and happy. May the Buddha Dhamma Sangha bless you, and see you shortly. Until then, good night. Sadhu.